Everyone, and welcome to the Monday, August 19th, 2024 workshop. It is 6:03. And can I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Betty Resch is absent. Vice Mayor Sarah Maliga.
Present.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy.
Here.
Commissioner Mimi May.
I'm here.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here.
Thank you. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Christopher McVoy.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner McVoy. So how are we going to do this tonight, Interim City Manager Brown? Do you want to do a presentation from WGI and staff first?
Yes, you can kick
Yes.
it off with William Waters, and we'll roll into the presentation.
Yeah.
It is the William Waters Show. It's all yours.
Actually, it's not. William, for
It's
the
all
record,
yours.
William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. It's actually the WGI Mobility Team Show. And they've done a very detailed presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler and Lisa. Let's just hold all questions for the end if we can. Let's just get through the whole presentation first.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Tyler Cornice. I'm here with Lisa Nissenson, and this is for the Lakewood Beach Mobility Plan.
It's not talking.
Okay.
Yeah, can we check if the mic is on?
It
is. Hello.
Okay.
It is. He's just a little taller than the microphone.
All right. So just a quick status update. The last time we were all here with you all was in January, and we went over the prioritization criteria and metro. And so what that means in terms of the overall plan, I just want to give it a quick review because it's been a while since we last talked to y'all. We had our kickoff meeting in February 2023. We did stakeholder interviews and the formation of the mobility task force. That's the folks that are informing us on our overall plans and that I'm ready to plan to move forward. And then it was plan funding and alignment, moving into our data gathering and analysis. And again, when we went over it, we went over the prioritization and metrics on our last meeting. Now, in where we are today is in between the prioritization criteria and the plan transmittal, which is going to come. That's going to be coming in October or November.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't hear you over this air conditioning vent, so you really have to speak into the mic. I
All right.
apologize.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
There we go.
Thank you.
Want me to start over? A little bit?
I can read the slide.
Okay.
I don't want
All
to
right.
interrupt. It's a long.
No, you help with me. So backing off just a little bit.
You said that you really said,
You know, I'm making it real easy for me over here. So. All right. Yeah, really. So back in January, we went over our prioritization criteria and metrics. And we're in the middle right now between plans transmittal and nailing down this plan for when all of you agree with what we have. What we heard at that January meeting was very important because we took the last couple of months here to narrow down those items. Those three major takeaways from that meeting were, one, we wanted to attain more survey diversity. I think it was Commissioner McVoy, you said the survey results are not representative of population, especially our younger age groups. And the other one was we need tangible, real projects that the city can actually pursue for improvements. We want to be able to enact the projects that you're recommending. And last, really important, and this came from Commissioner Diaz, will our plan take into account the regional plans impacting our transportation system, meaning your TPA plans, your county plans, your FDOT plans? And that really puts together the major takeaways from that January meeting. So what did we do? I told you what we heard. The major items of what we heard or what we did was we went out and we collected 81 new survey respondents. 20% were actually within the age group of 18 to 29 years old. And when you compare that to the original survey, only 6% in that original survey was in that bracket. So we really went out there and we tried to get as many more young people as possible. And I know that 81 number is not large, but when we're talking about a mobility survey, this is pretty good. This is at the Street Painting Festival. That was very helpful. Proposing tangible projects. So our plan, and it's an 82-page, 83-page plan, I think, it identifies 25 intersections and 10 corridors for improvements within the city. And this is based off of the Federal Highway Association's countermeasures, mainly for funding, which Lisa is going to talk about a little bit more. From very big to very small. And when I say very small, I mean, you can go out there and do this today. to very big, meaning to $2.5 million projects. Second, or third, align the plan with regional transportation projects. So the plan really focused on compiling those plans from all those agencies that I spoke about before, the TPA, FDOT, their county plans, and making sure that this plan aligned with and not necessarily overlapped, but plugged into those existing plans, mostly for purposes of funding and for tangibility. We want to give you things that are actually going to happen, and can be done. And then, Lisa, I'm just going to pass this over to you, talk about some good.
Going to stand up. All right. So as Tyler mentioned, we have submitted a draft plan. It's 128 pages long. I'm not going to sit up here and read it, but I'm going to hit a couple of high points and also really focus on those things that you can get going on now. One of the first things that we were really trying to get to is updating your comprehensive plan. In the state of Florida, it's very, very important that you are able to trace back different projects, even mobility projects, to something in your comprehensive plan. So what we did is we looked at 3 or 5 different elements within the comp plan, and we did 2 things. We looked at where you need entirely new policies, and then where can you tweak or edit an existing policy. So just to get a flavor of what that looks like, you can see that for the context sensitive implementation of mobility and micro mobility solutions, that would be a new policy. The second would be actually calling out complete streets in the comprehensive plan because it's not quite there yet. As far as what an edit looks like, this is where we are adding in bicycle parking and where we're looking at your new parking study that's going on is to include new language, just a couple of words that would let you implement some of the recommendations in that plan if it comes to the point where you're doing things like parking, pricing, parking costs, that sort of thing. So again, that comes in the plan alignment category as well. We also looked at updates to your zoning code. Again, that's the DNA of getting things done. And what some of the things there are, for example, adding a definition of a mobility hub so that you can start to create little amenity areas that serve and support more than one mode. So can your bus stop also be combined with bike parking? Or an information kiosk or something like that. Again, just another way so that if the TPA starts to, and Palmtran starts to come out with these advanced bus stops, it's in your code. And again, some of the edits are multimodal. There's all these new types of bikes. I know we've got in the audience tonight several bicyclists. And we really want to do justice to that mode as far as multimodal goes, because we are getting to the point where lots of people are buying their own e-bikes, where they're biking for more than just recreation. And so how do we recognize that from the code all the way up to the high level? So the project identification, of course, in the 128 page document, there are lots of ideas in there. So we wanted to give you a roadmap of how to pick those projects that have the best chance of being funded and implemented. And we really did look at 3 different buckets there. How it aligns with other plans. And so that's the TPA, the capital improvement plan, the comp plan, and then of course comments that came in from the commissioners and also from the public. So we took that screen to see what are people talking about the most. As far as implementability goes, we did look at where are there opportunities on Lake Worth Beach roadways, because of course those are easier to attack than when you need to go in with partners. And then with quick implementation. And we are in a brand new era now of different types of roadway improvements that are called quick build. Things like the FlexiPosts, things like modular infrastructure that are coming online that basically don't need you to tear up asphalt, which is of course something that adds a lot of money and a lot of time to a project. Quick implementation could also apply to projects you do with FDOT or with the TPA. And those are things that are operational changes instead of construction changes. Again, there's something called the leading pedestrian interval, which has been proven to actually be super safe for pedestrians and also add to the quality of the walk for people who are out walking. Again, with this plan, we did focus a lot on safety because that's where a lot of the money is, but it can't be repeated enough that if people don't feel safe walking and biking, they won't walk and bike. And so it is, there is a reason why we're just pounding on safety so much. And then as far as the end with the matching the funding criteria, some of the things that funders look for, and this is in addition to some of the new criteria on equity and on climate change, USDOT is looking for projects that can be bundled. So instead of just doing spot treatments, where does it make sense to do 6 in a row or 6 in a cluster, as an example? They want to see things that are effective. So we paid a lot of attention to the research that shows what they call crash modification factors. And so is it really, really effective, like the leading pedestrian interval, or is it shown to be maybe a little uneven in the results? And then we are also looking at where there's a low match or no match, because there are some programs, and especially with some of the neighborhoods that really do need some catch up when it comes to infrastructure, those neighborhoods qualify. In the next couple of slides, I violate every rule of PowerPoint. I'm very, very sorry. But these are in the plan, and I just thought for people in the audience, it might be helpful for us just to dissect what the small print is and why it's important. So first and foremost, let's talk about the intersections, because that is where the preponderance of crashes. Oh, hi.
If you're in the back of the work page.
I printed out everything but the forward.
I got the one about it.
Okay,
Page 59 and 60.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
great, thank you.
Page 59 and 60.
What this table does is it points out the top 25 intersections where we saw crashes of concern. It could be number of crashes, but also severity of crashes. At the top in the pink box, we actually list out what some of the treatments you can employ to address those crashes. Not every one of those countermeasures works in every single situation. So that's why we decided to tease those out. So on the top row, for example, that street, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 different countermeasures that would be appropriate in that location. In some ways, it could be a single treatment, and in others, it could be a combination. One of the things to note is that most of these intersections occur where there is a road that is not under your control. So, that puts a little bit of a damper on that safety. But the good news is that a lot of those form a corridor. And this is where you would really work with the TPA to focus in on the corridors that they would be putting through in their list of preferred projects, or that they would be putting into their TIP, their transportation improvement plan. Again, this is where you would bundle those projects along the corridor. And we've given you a couple of options of where those could occur. Because you would be working with partners, we would have to have them weigh in. And each of those is going to have pros and cons as far as what they could be. So for example, on 6th Ave, because there's so much work being done towards the interchange, it might make sense to actually make that a safety corridor, because you don't want to do, certain treatments right as they come off the ramp, and then all of a sudden they're taken off down 6th Street. It is an important street, for the city as far as all modes. And so that's how we would go to the TPA. I also want to emphasize that we interviewed the TPA several times in developing this plan, and they are extremely eager to work with the city when it comes to this plan, because they have as their top priority safety. Again, that plan alignment is so important. So safety was one way that we looked at projects, but then of course, since this is a mobility plan, we looked at other types of projects that deal with mobility, walking, biking, infrastructure improvements, mobility management. And so we came up with a lot of different categories there. And I want to just highlight a couple of ideas as we go through this list. As we all know, Lake Worth is very well known for its art festival, street art festival. Well, as it so happens, at the national level, there is a movement called asphalt art, and Mayor Michael Bloomberg has gotten involved in this. And it's basically tactical urbanism or just street painting that you can do for placemaking. You can do as part of an art festival. But when his group went in and studied it, it also has an enormous safety benefit. In fact, crashes were reduced by 50%, those involving pedestrians. So there could be within Lake Worth Beach an art project that combines, your art festival and your safety. That could be done on your local streets along the low stress bicycle network. It could be part of a project that is part of the TPA, but I really do think that, putting that forth as a community building as much as an infrastructure project would be one way that we could combine all the facts and figures we found, but with what you do best. And it could become some of your signature roadway design that has safety benefits. So that's just one example of something that we put in a tactical urbanism category. Under the second one, that's identifying funding. I'll get to that in the last slide. Comp plan changes we talked about. Mobility management. I'm sorry, I'm going up. Oh, good. One of the 50 spam calls I get every day. Mobility management. So some of the things there are transportation demand management. The TPA is actually developing a program that's in addition to those sorts of things that are already here. And so we have recommended and put steps in the plan about how you can approach a TDM that is workable, implementable, and very practical. We don't want to give you something that worked in a bigger city or even for West Palm Beach. Some of the things they're doing, working with very large employers, that won't work here, but we tried to figure out what would be the best. For strategies for vehicles, of course, vehicle electrification is there. USDOT came out today with $800 million in additional funding for charging stations. And again, we've got some tips in there about how to start tackling that money. Circulators. Circuit is probably one of the more exciting things that happened to come along right as we were doing the mobility study, and we were able to investigate what is working in other neighborhoods and what is not. The tough thing about these new on-demand microtransit is that they don't work like traditional transit at all. So if you went to school and learned how bus routes work, it's really kind of hard to apply that. In most instances, what is beginning to happen is that the company will come in as a pilot, as you know, and I have heard that ridership is very strong. I talked to them just a couple of days ago to get an update. There are some, of course, hotspots where people are going back and forth. But all of this is feeding into an analysis that they will do just to see, are there inefficiencies in our service? And the other thing about microtransit is that their services aren't described in miles, they are described in minutes. And so they really like to keep the wait time at 10 minutes or under, and sometimes it's in the contract. So what they will begin to see is are we able to meet that 10-minute time? And if they aren't, that could result in several things. It could be more vehicles, it could be shrinking the surface area. It could be going to the hotels on the island to see if they will sponsor shuttles, because what West Palm Beach found is that more that the Hilton and the Ben bought their own vehicles, that actually took out some of the demand so that they could improve service for people who aren't in the hotels. And so you can expect these types of things as Circuit begins to mature. The next iteration of this is going to be fixed and flexible service. So what they may find is that because so much of the service is on Lake and Lucerne, it would make sense to have like one color shuttle, so to speak, doing that route. And then if you're on the western edge of town and you want to go to the beach, they won't take you directly to the beach, but they'll take you to the closest fixed route transit. And again, that will totally cut down on that service time. I'm not saying that that would happen here, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what the companies are finding as we move along and what you can actually promote and write into your contracts and things like this. Because not everything is going to be done inside of the comprehensive plan. That's the good thing and bad thing about mobility is now it's so varied. And with for pedestrians, of course, we would like to see something happen with shade. And the reason we say that is because in the public comments that just came up over and over and over again. But of course, it also makes sense. We've had kind of a hot summer here. And especially for pedestrians, that does. Again, there's funding out there for that. And so we identified and tackled some of that funding. Alleyway improvements, we've also heard that. Now, that actually has thread through a lot of plans in the past. Because the alleyways are kind of disjointed, it is going to be one of those things where you may be tackling segments instead of a whole network at once. But we did find that there's some that may be better candidates than others. For strategies for cyclists, of course, there's something called the low stress network. I remember when I started cycling and I was an advocate, we would find a route we wanted and we were adamant that we would only be satisfied if we could bicycle on that street. Those days have kind of muted a little bit where if there is a gentler street that's one block over, that's fine. And so the advocates who are of my I guess age, I have really come around to the fact that there are better ways to do the network and slower ways. Now, of course, not everybody knows where that is. So that's where some of the wayfinding and maybe some of the asphalt art would come into play for having people, steering people actually to that low stress network. We also did pick up on electric bicycles, and part of that is because it's a regional, in fact, a big, I would say South Florida, but it's happening all around the country. And even if you don't have bike share, there are so many people, especially in service industries, buying their own bikes. So one of the things we were looking at is there a way that you could do one of the first electric bike network projects in the country? And so we called around to see if anybody's doing this. And the one we could find was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That would be a TPA project, but it also might be a project that you tackle with the county because they are getting ready to launch their safety action plan. And it's going to be extremely important to work with the county to say, hey, Lake Worth Road, we've got ideas, or 6F, we've got ideas. They need to know what you came up with in your safety action plan because it could behoove them to just say, all right, that's in the mix, instead of having to exert a lot more energy. But some of the e-bikes that are especially important to link schools to and universities, job centers, your service jobs, that a lot of those are over on the barrier island. We think that might be also very lucrative to the funders to do a first or a rare of its kind. Because all eyes are on e-bikes for a lot of people who can't drive, who don't have a car, or who don't want a second car. They travel up to 25 miles an hour, which is local conditions for cars. So for drivers who are worried that, how are these things gonna work? The answer is they're gonna be going the same speed that you are on a lot of these local streets. People wanted additional bike racks, so we looked at some of the locations or, decision-making process for getting those installed. The people who know the best locations are actually the bicyclists. Maybe sometimes consultants aren't as well positioned unless, of course, they happen to park around your town. And then lastly, there is the facilitate the transit-oriented development, really look at your tri-rail station and then the other property that's closer to the tracks in town, just to see, how can you pre-position to bring economic development and development there, working with the authorities. I know that has been in plans, going back decades, but it does seem like now, especially with Brightline, people all of a sudden now see rail as a real possibility. And just how to leverage that for housing is really important. So let's see, I promised you funding. So here is a near-term block of what you can start to look for. And I will go through the acronyms. I'm sorry, these are all out of Washington, DC, so except for the TPA, that's local. The USDOT SS for All stands for Safe Streets for All, and that is the biggest pile of money for safety improvements. That bucket of money will be available for 2 more rounds. They've started splitting the rounds, so there will be another 1.5 years of rounds, maybe 2 years. The good thing about this plan is that we tried to write it so that it was 2 plans in one, that it was your safety action plan and also your mobility plan. Important to note that Palm Beach County, Palm Beach Gardens, a lot of the other cities, they are just now getting funding to develop their safety action plan with projects. So you guys are, 1 year or 2 years ahead of that. So I'm hoping that means that we'll be able to accelerate your list of projects as everybody else is looking at theirs. They have split it up into what's called demonstration projects and construction projects. And the demonstration projects are meant to be a test. And so what they want to fund is something where you want to test, let's say 6th Ave, you want to test, a series of quick build there. That would fall under that demonstration grant. There's a deadline coming up August 29th. That's probably a little too soon, but as you can see in May, that there will be another round. And so we should be able to come up with that project list, especially if we're going in with the TPA. In the fall of this year, there's a grant called Reconnecting America Communities. We have consulted with the Treasure Coast RPC on that because they have some ideas about what they want to see, and that could be a source of funding, if not this year, then next. Or there could be a smaller project that just kicks it off and proves that the community's behind it. Going on into the winter, FDOT also has a safety grant concept paper, so that would be another source of funding for safety grants. USDOT has a big program called RAISE. Those are projects that are $1 million and up, and again, that would necessitate working with the TPA to really apply for some of those grants. So that's really state and federal funding on the top half. On the lower half, we've separated out the TPA because this is going to be the most important process for lining up projects. And Commissioner Diaz is on that board and knows very well that, we've got to get in there and get our projects on the list. I also wanted to point out that there are other grant makers out there like AARP and the Asphalt Art Project that have grants. They're small, about $25,000, but that would be, buckets of paint and things of that nature. And so we put lists of some of those grant programs in the plan as well. But I wanted to really emphasize that, you know, we're here on the home stretch. So, you know, so you can hit the ground running with the TPA. As far as how we're going to select the projects, we're going to have to work with Jamie and William just to ferret out which of the projects seem to be the best candidates. You know, we've got so many projects in here, you can't do them all at once. But I gave you highlights of some of the projects that we thought were going to be in that first round of things to go after. And so what's next is this commission workshop. The plan will go out for one more round of public comment, and then hopefully that transmittal will be October 2024. So with that, that was a lot of information. We're ready for questions.
Thank you for that amazing update. Does anybody have, I'm sure we all have lots of questions. Commissioner McBoyd, questions, please?
Some of them are questions, some of them are comments. Sorry. I noticed that I liked a lot the suggested additions to the comp plan. Seems like that's a pretty logical thing to do, and I'm guessing, okay, you may have said it, but emphasize it again, that having things in the comp plan is presumably helpful when you go to apply for funding. Indicates you're serious about it. You mentioned complete streets in that context. Should we have something about Vision Zero in there as well? I'm pretty sure we passed a resolution ordinance, something. I don't know that we've done anything concrete on it, and I don't know whether it's in the comp plan or should be, but
I believe it is in the comp plan. I believe it's in the comp plan, but I will go back and double check. And if it's not, I'll add that to the list.
okay, good. Might as well. But they're related, there's some overlap, but the idea is good. One little one, I didn't see it in the map there. But that doesn't mean that you haven't thought about it. 17th Avenue North is a very interesting non-noticed street. But it's interesting because it goes under 95. So if you want to get out of the city on a bicycle, you can get all the way up to Forest Hill. You can get from Forest Hill to the jail. You can get to Water Management District on pretty reasonable quiet streets. So that might be one. It doesn't really need much of anything, I don't think, but it's worth being aware that that's a very safe way to get from one side of 95 to the other. Can't agree more on shade and also on what you said about two reasons for emphasizing safety in the mobility plan. Obviously, funding, they're looking for it, makes sense. It's a good goal, it's a measurable goal. But the other one that you also emphasized, totally agree with. There are a lot of people, I mean, Lake Worth, we're flat. Some of the year, the climate's pretty reasonable. Electric bikes obviously expand that part of the year that's reasonable. Or electric scooters or various other electric things. But an awful lot of people just won't do it if they don't feel safe. And probably a large majority of people do not feel very safe doing that here in town. So that emphasis, I think, makes a lot of sense. And then the other one, I can't remember if I said it or not, but importance of shade. It is brutal out there, and the more shade that we can build in. I just talked with the city manager today. I feel very strongly and I've been interested in trees separate from mobility, just for a lot of reasons for a long time. It's not for you, but it's for us as a commission. We have to somehow have policies, procedures in place that sends a clear message to our community that we're serious about trees. Every day, probably all of us get reports of somebody who's hacking a tree or is cutting down a tree, and we get there and, you know, it's too late. The shade's gone. if we're gonna put energy into funding, looking for, and there are a variety of funding sources for trees and shade, that's great, but if we don't have serious policies that indicate we are gonna take care of those trees, we'll get that funding once, and then it's like, ciao, guys, you guys aren't serious about trees. We've gotta have some written things, whether it's training, required licensing for people who do trimming of trees, so that it's not only on the homeowners the burden, but also on the people doing the work. Or penalties, or education, or all of the above, but we have to get much more serious about, as a city, that we put our money where our mouth is on trees. I think that's all I have. Great, thank you. I like the encouragements to, obviously work with the county, work with TPA, work with Treasure Coast, work with any partners we can find. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McBoy. We'll just go right down the road, because I don't know who else's light was on, but Commissioner May.
All right, hey guys. Thank you for that. That was a pretty good overview. A lot of acronyms. I was, trying to figure it out as I went. So it was like kind of listening to a foreign language at some points, but I think I followed along. I have first I have one question. Can you just explain a little bit more about what the street art and safety, how that goes together and what that actually looks like?
Okay. So the reason it got, attention as a safety measure is, when Michael Bloomberg, he's got a foundation and funds a lot of placemaking and equity and art types of projects. And he noticed that after they got installed, that the traffic was behaving differently. So he hired a firm called Sam Schwartz to go out and study all of the different installations that were there with a before and an after study. And for those of us in consulting, having something that's real peer-reviewed research is really, really important. And so that's where the numbers came
So
from.
but I'm besides the numbers, I get that.
Oh,
but,
okay.
like, what is it? Is it like a permanent art piece on the street?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a painted, they're also called street murals.
Okay, that makes more
And
sense.
so Delray Beach has a couple of them.
Right, okay, I know West Palm has a couple as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. But, thinking about some of the artists that come here and commissioning them, getting a grant to commission them to take whatever they did on the street and make a crosswalk out of it, something like that.
Mhm.
That would be logical. It could be local students. It could be,
Okay.
yeah, just, that emphasis and that culture of art that's so strong here.
Yeah, absolutely, I love it, I love it. I just wanted everybody to kind of understand where you were going with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Let's see, couple other questions. One is golf carts. Not mentioned. And I brought that up in our one-on-one.
Right.
And I was just rereading Elizabeth's brief, and I know we would have to do some ordinance changing, but that's a very popular mode of transportation in this city, and we can't ignore it in this study. We have to figure out how to make it safer, because it's not going anywhere.
And I think on our one-on-ones, you really focus in on, it's not in your code. Wasn't that?
I just said that there was that they had done a study for it,
Okay.
but they're there. So we have to, like you were saying with trees, we as a commission have to look at how do we regulate golf carts? How do we make sure people are driving them safely? How do we decide, are they allowed on the FDOT streets, which wouldn't be us anyway? Are they allowed on our streets? Are they low speed vehicles? Do they have to have license plates? All of those things are on us, but as part of the mobility study, it is a means of transportation that is used now, and we need to look at it. We can't just overlook it. So that's one of the things. The other thing, couple things, our alleyways and our greenways. Those are, to me, if we better utilize them, I think they would be cleaner. And I think they would be less attractive to people who are looking to dump debris. Because right now, even if you took a three-wheeler or a four-wheeler and you wanted to go down some of the alleys, you'd get stuck. with mattresses and other stuff in there. So if we can come up with a way that these are used more than just for the utility trucks if something goes out, I think that might not be a bad idea. I don't know what the rest of you guys think about that, but we have that's a great asset. You know, our greenways and our alleyways. So, those could be on bike routes. I mean, I don't know exactly how it works, but I just don't think we have to use them because they're really kind of unique to Lake Worth. Well, maybe Florida, but definitely Lake Worth. The other question, I like how, and I was just looking at it more with the Safety for All grants. It looks like now's the time to grab some of those. I was even looking like, even Domino's Pizza has grants. Because
Right.
they want you to make safer streets for the drivers.
Right.
So there's a lot, you're right, there's a lot of money out there and there's a lot of things for us to look for. And I think that's where I am, at least for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Commissioner Diaz?
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. But it is really exciting to be here. Like, you know, we often have to endure comments of like, well, why are we studying things? And we study things a lot. And this example here, the draft that we have here, it's really really exemplary of why we do those things. You know, we need money. We can't just like show up with a napkin drawing of we need money for this. Like we have to invest some some plans in there. And I think you really put it together, especially like in the connections to our other agencies, related agencies, DOT, TPA and things like that. But also, you know, I'm really excited about the connection to our other upcoming studies, like our parking study and to a large degree our housing, because it's all interconnected. And I think you touched on some really good points, like you know, the rise of e-bikes. Like that's often a thing that I bring up at TPA because so often the board loves to talk about things like self-driving cars and whatnot. And now I have to eat my words because there's a city that just is testing one right down south. And so they're coming soon, right? It's great to talk about those future technologies, but I think it's Miami has like a self-driving car that they're testing. But there's things that we have to deal with now, and to many degrees, things we've been asking for already for years, like protected bike lanes. And the rise in e-bikes, like who would have guessed that they were gonna sell as much as they have? I mean, it's exponential. It's wild, and you can get really good ones now. Me being another bicycle enthusiast, you can get some really good e-bikes with like really nice Samsung batteries. Like these things used to be just so expensive 2 years ago, and now for, you know, the price of a pretty decent non-e-bike, you can get a really nice e-bike. So the use is there, much like the golf carts and the LSVs. The use is already happening, and I feel like a lot of communities are not prepared to handle that. To be quite frankly, it's a safety concern. These e-bikes, you know, the cargo bike that I had weighed like 75 pounds, and which is great. It was a great long tail cargo bike, and you know, their speed capped at 25 miles an hour, but some minor adjustments to the computer and you can turn that off. And these things are really fast, and it's a very legitimate safety concern that I feel like, quite frankly, a lot of municipalities just haven't really stepped up to really prepare for that. And you know, I don't think the heat map really reflects that just yet. Luckily, I don't think we have that many things, but it's all a continuing conversation that we have to continue to have. One thing that you know, it's good reading material for anyone who wants to read the entire mobility plan. I know we do, but anybody out in the public who wants to read it, for sure read it if you're into planning and mobility and cycling and whatnot. You know, one thing that I always try to get people to focus on is the heat map of the incidents. And it's in a lot of ways, you know, we hear the comments, why do we study things we already know the answer to? And it's like that's a half truth. Like we can kind of assume when, you know, envisioning a heat map where all the incidents are, just because that's where all the traffic is and the pedestrian. And, you know, but we need to get it out on paper and work through it and see what needs to change in our comp plan, where can we fund these projects and whatnot, but something that, you know, I think is will be really useful is there has been, and not, I'm not saying that there's like already loads of projects ready to go in the hopper unless William hasn't updated us yet, but things like Sixth Avenue South and Dixie, that, you know, I live now I live a block, a couple blocks from there, but I used to live right on that corner and it is so busy, not just with cars, but the pedestrians, the bicyclists, incredibly busy intersection. It's amazing that there aren't honestly more incidents there because it's also a very dark intersection and corridor. And no matter how much we try to explain to people, if you're riding your bike like at night, you know, at least have reflectors, you should have lights. Please don't wear like a black hoodie and ride up the middle of the street. That happens way too much. But there's things that we can do as a city, hopefully, to help mitigate that, especially in that corridor that I feel like is being looked at heavily with the huge opportunity for redevelopment. So there's already a good amount of commercial that's there, but I feel like there's just gonna be more coming and more density there. And for once, I would love to get to a point where as planners, we can plan for those incidents before the, like, you know, we could set up the safety before the traffic comes. As opposed to let's do the development and then work on the mobility issues that come up afterwards. So so it's all really exciting stuff. I think the timing is perfect. I know at TPA we're just going through our LRTP, so we can start getting stuff on the list. Yeah, the timing is there, and I definitely look forward to hearing updates about what projects are going to percolate to the list. On the shade thing, I think, you know, I had brought up the need for us to have written out in code or in policy to move. We're obviously limited because, you know, Dixie's not ours and whatnot, but on our properties, on our medians, we should be doing things like Florida friendly landscaping, which is definitely very environmentally focused, right? We want shade, we want things that are easier to take care of, but there is Lisa brought up a great point that is often not talked about. There's a indirect effect, and it's similar to the street art thing, and where if you have something, there's just a certain look, a certain sense of place in certain communities that encourages drivers to drive slower and safer. And it's usually trees on the side of the road. The art thing. This would be really hostile, so I'm not recommending this, but I mean, like, you could do like you know, if we 3D painted a fake pothole, that'll really slow down cars, right? Well, you know, just colorful, like, even if it was a pedestrian crosswalk that was just different, not in a regular bars, and it was colorful like that, and visually is a cue to people, encourages them to.
Like the one over by Highland on A Street.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
fabulous. I love it.
Exactly, and those might be low hanging fruit, maybe, today I learned that Domino's and AARP funds transportation projects. Wouldn't have guessed that, but, yeah, you know, maybe we can identify some of those like low hanging fruits and whatnot, because I love that idea, and for our bus stops, I think they're coming soon, but a while ago we did get significant amount of funding to improve a lot of them because it's brutal out there waiting for a bus.
Thank you. I got a couple of things as well. So when we talk about shade trees,
Yes.
we're talking to somebody who does walk to City Hall. And it's great if I had shade trees, but it's even better if I had complete sidewalks.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've gone through this mobility study. And I really thought deep on it. And again, the low hanging fruit, like you said, the golf carts, it's all the stuff that I had written down. No bird scooters, we don't want those. When we say e-bike, that's not what we're referring to, people. We're not gonna have scooters running around all the town. I'm really excited to see what the parking study shows because, again, we have 2-lane roads and we have people parking on both sides, which then makes it 1 lane and it's the middle lane, and then you're curling up to a stop sign and you're just hoping that nobody turns left or right into you while you're waiting to cross. So it's really, to me, it's a bigger plan that has to fit together. The alleyways and the greenways, I completely agree with you. I actually reported to our city manager and Mr. Perry today, dumping on the greenway space of Fifth Avenue in between the two alleys today, 4 mattresses piled up. And this is where my kids walk back and forth to the high school. So if we can figure out a way to start implementing maybe hardening those well, I consider them drive-throughs, because everybody in my neighborhood uses them to get to their parking pads. They're not just a pass-through, that's actually how you gain access to homes, and especially with the new homes being built, Habitat homes, and a lot of the homes that are coming in on the 25 by 50 plots, there's a parking pad that's usually put behind there, and that's how you get to it, the alleyway. So I agree on that. I did notice that I didn't see any train safety provisions in here, or what we can do for train safety.
Okay.
And I know there's still funding out there, but that is a huge concern of mine. Again, we have a lot of kids who walk and bike and dodge the trains. I've brought up possibly putting in a fence like Lantana did to deter people from using it to cut through. So I'd like to see some more information on the train safety. I noticed that a lot of these projects, you guys, when I'm talking to the staff and to the commission, if we compiled some of this, we could really start knocking out some of these projects with CDBG funds in some of these areas. You know, and if we look at year 2 and year 3 from now, the CDBG money that we have coming in, so, you know, it's usually upwards of $300,000. I do have a question for you guys at WGI. On some of these, it says rough cost estimate, $0. Does that mean you're gonna do it for free?
No, that just means that it's items that are no cost today. I mean, when you go out there, if you have a bucket of paint, like you were talking about tactical urbanism, that would be an example. of
So
what
let's
costs.
look at number 13, Lucerne Avenue and North Federal Highway, right? Number 13. So I have bicycle lanes. Leading pedestrian interval, I don't even know what that means. Corridor access management. Yellow change intervals, more lighting or lighting. Local road safety plans. So that to me equates to money, because there's staff time and resources that will be implemented. It, you know, so when I have 6 things but a 0 next to it, that makes me question, how are we gonna get there? So there's a couple on there that had that I was concerned about. And then the trees, we obviously know is part of, is the green space master plan that we're out doing, which is amazing. But again, to me, we can talk about shade trees all day long. If I don't have a sidewalk to walk along, that is part of mobility, is, you know, you can't walk on a sidewalk for 4 houses, and then now you gotta get in the street, and you gotta dodge the traffic and the garbage cans that are left, and you gotta go 5 more houses, and you get back on the sidewalk. So to me, this is a great, I guess, base for me, but I would like to see more things come into play on how we're really gonna make the city mobile for everybody. Because to me, it is a bigger project. And if we're talking about road bonds and, you know, possibly going out to bond, and we need to look at this as a bigger picture, we need to know that data now, and that information now. Anything else? I see your light. Mr. Brown, do you have anything?
No, this workshop obviously was to get all of your input, because we're, you know, kind of coming toward the end of this process, so. I have nothing to add.
Okay,
We're
perfect.
here to listen to you.
I did have one more thing. The street corners. If we can, like the low hanging fruit, if we can start striping every single street corner, so people stop parking right up to the corners. I had a kid 2 months ago who literally rode his bicycle right into the side of my Jeep as I was leaving the stop sign.
Yeah.
Because he did not see me pulling out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
That actually is included in one of the comprehensive plan updates, where there's something called daylighting.
Right.
And daylighting is considered to be 25 feet away, and in your current regulations, it's only 20 feet.
But if we could see that, like on what that would do to the corners that don't have stop signs, again, just to kind of back people away from parking on the corners.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the people in our communities use big construction trucks.
Yeah.
And some of these houses have 5 and 6 and 7 huge white vans, and they park it all the way down the road, and you can't see anything. And if you're in a little Miata or a Fiat, you're gonna get squished like a grape. Mr. McVoy.
It's like a great,
Just like
doesn't feel
great.
very good.
It's nice. I don't recommend it.
I had just a couple more little ones that I forgot about. one clarification from you, you mentioned something about e-scooters, Vice Mayor, and I didn't quite understand.
The little birds that people just jump on and then leave all over the place
The
in certain cities.
anchorless,
Yeah, they
anchorless
literally, you swipe your card, you jump on it, you drive 6 blocks and then you leave it in the middle of the sidewalk. Major metropolitan cities have those. I have no interest in having those all over my city.
They had them down in Bayside in Miami and now have completely banned all of them because of accidents and, I mean, they were everywhere.
Yeah, they literally leave them everywhere. So
Yeah.
that's what, when we say electric scooters, for the public, we're not referring to those. We're talking about e-bikes that you pay for,
the
chargeable.
app-based anchorless
Correct.
ones, which end up evolving into an artificial leaf program.
Yeah.
So,
Just so I understand clearly, you don't have a problem with people owning their own scooters, e-scooters and using.
No, I just don't want e-scooters where people can ride share them.
Yeah, I have a feeling that, I mean, they're like $300 for an e-scooter. Most people are gonna just say, I'll get my own, not worry about it. I worry about safety on those, and I'd love to see us somehow have a lot more helmets floating around. One that I didn't mention earlier, but it's a big deal, and somewhere I just saw one, I'm trying to remember where it was down here. On-demand, crossings, like of Dixie Highway, where you can push a button and it turns on the light to whatever. I don't think it was the one near.
The
the
CRA
school.
parking lot up north has
What's
that. The CRA parking lot up north, I believe has that on Dixie Highway.
The CRA parking lot.
There's a CRA parking lot on the east side of the street by the church.
by Tropical Car Wash.
Maybe that's right. I don't know. I saw one somewhere or other and I thought, boy, because trying to get across Dixie Highway makes you crazy. And it's certainly not safe. So that was one. Another thing that Commissioner Diaz certainly referred to e-bikes a lot. Something that in our community, and I remember years ago reading a study from some national institute that looked at economics and said that for many families, your house is your biggest expense if you go that route, and then car is the next. So if it's unlikely that e-bikes are going to replace every car in a family, but they could easily make the decision on the second or the third car. And that is a huge economic impact. So anything that we as a community do to make that safer and increase that, we're helping our residents out financially significantly. Let's do it, keeping them safe. I love, give away helmets. I mean, they do something. They did, but they did it for 2 hours in the middle of the afternoon when everybody's working. So we've got to do more of that and do it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? We're good?
Yeah, I'd want to touch on, you brought up a really good point about the $0 thing, and Lisa, you mentioned something that, and you don't need to answer this now, but as we continue this on, I would love to learn more about, you mentioned something about a lot of these things can be covered as O&M, and so that would make getting money from TPA much easier. So if that's like a good strategy, then that'd be great.
I'd just like to point out, the Commissioner Diaz is wearing a bicycle shirt to the mobility. Touche, touche.
Okay,
And I rode my skateboard to work today.
if staff doesn't have anything else,
I've got a couple of things. We
Okay.
did sign an additional services contract with WGI to look at more intensely the LVR chapter 23 section. They had made recommendations, if you noticed in Lisa's presentation. There are other chapters that involve public safety side, I think it's one called sidewalks and roads. There's chapter 2, there's chapter 19. And we've asked them to go drill down from the comp plan suggestions to recommendations for our LVR. Because one of the things we wanted to do is be able to hold developers' feet to the fire to implement some of these things and have them be more on their burden, and even in some of the sustainable bonus improvements in the public realm. The other aspect too is the schedule that they popped up there. The goal would be that our local planning agencies, as part of a comp plan amendment, would look at the mobility plan in October at their meetings, and then come to you for the first reading as a comp plan amendment either in November or the first meeting, unfortunately, in December, since Thanksgiving falls really late. I think we have two meetings in November. If we do, then we'll likely have it the second meeting in November. It does have to go to the state before we can fully ratify it and adopt it. So likely our goal is to have it in place as the comp plan amendment by the end of the year. There's also quite a bit of cross fertilization between this plan and the open space recreation master plan in terms of shade and getting to and from parks and some things that Chenmore is doing for us there. And also keep in mind that we'll also feed on those two plans is the carbon neutrality element that you all recommended that we fund beginning in fiscal year 2025, which will be October 1. And Chenmore is again our planning consultant who will be taking that up once that year begins. So our planning and our changes and our amendments to our comp plan have not ended. We still have a long way to go. So you'll be seeing quite a bit of legislation coming before you over the next 6 months.
Do you need any guidance for the proposed changes? Do you need any guidance for us, or have you got enough guidance that, yeah, slide those in and bring it to us to approve?
I think we've got plenty of guidance, and there's some things we've gone over from a staff standpoint that haven't all been incorporated in the plan. And we do have the window open still for the public to provide general comments and issues. And so we do need to close the plan down and have a final draft essentially by the second week of September at the very latest. So it can make the LPA meetings in October.
Okay, great.
We might
I'm
want.
sorry, William. I just wanted you to note that the meeting in November is going to be on the 19th, as the first meeting would actually be on election day. And so we are probably not going to have that one.
Having one meeting.
So we likely can have our first reading on October 19th, predicated we get it to the LPAs, which are either going to be the first and second Wednesdays of the month or the second and third Wednesday of October.
I think she meant November 19th.
No, that's the city commission. But we can't.
Yes, that's a commission.
If our planning and zoning board and preservation board don't hear it in October.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I was actually gonna bring that up at tomorrow night's meeting, if that's something that you all would just like to cancel, or if you want to reschedule that first meeting in November for another day. We'd have to look at everyone's schedule and see if that's something that you guys are interested in.
Yeah, I'd wait till the mayor gets back too, before we give direction on that.
And also look at how much it's gonna be on the 19th, because if we have the 19th, I'd rather find another night. But if we don't have the 19th, then we should be okay.
And also to keep in mind, what William has said about schedules of trying to get this lined up in time.
That's what he's saying, October. For planning and zoning. Okay, motion to adjourn? Nope, it's a workshop. Never mind.
Yeah, you don't need a motion.
Right.
Toodaloo.
Toodaloo.